Just about every real estate agent in the Houston area is saying that our housing market is strong, it's steady, it's hot. We're anticipating a huge spring market. Prices are up, builders are still selling homes. But here's the thing I think a lot of people are not saying, and that is that in many areas of our suburbs, the market is barely holding itself together, and I'm starting to see a few cracks here and there, and if you haven't seen them yet, hopefully you will also start to see them by the end of this video. Now, before we get too far into this video, I do want to make it clear this is not a sensational video. This is not a market crash video. I don't believe the Houston market is crashing. I don't even believe it's capable of having a full crash. I do believe, however, there are some instabilities within the market and maybe some mirages that are making it seem a little bit more strong and steady than it might actually be. The reason I started this channel, the reason I continue to make videos, is I want to be the voice I wish I had when I was buying a home here in the Houston area. Number one, as I mentioned, builders are quietly panicking. The truth is, Houston new construction numbers barely improved in 2024 compared to 2023, even with massive incentives. The average production builder here in Houston is probably offering about $30,000 in incentives just to keep buyers interested and showing up. But that's not what really grabbed my attention. What really grabbed my attention is that their January numbers in a survey were the lowest they've ever been recorded since 2012. Now, granted, in January, the South did have a huge, rare winter storm, which could have impacted the numbers a little bit, but I'm definitely going to be watching the February and March numbers as they become available. At the same time, Houston's new home listings were up 27% in January, but we all know that that's probably not even all the inventory because builders tend to hide some of their inventory from the public market in order to create an illusion of scarcity to be able to control the market and prices a little bit better, which I'm going to talk about how they control the market later on in this video. Also, already seeing 31% of new homes have reduced their price, and I truly believe we're going to see more as more existing homes enter the spring market. If the demand was really that strong, builders would not need to offer these aggressive incentives, but here we are. Number two is that high production home builders are controlling the market. Houston leads the nation in new construction home sales. D.R. Horton, Lennar, Pulte, these high production, publicly traded companies are absolutely dominating our suburbs right now, churning out affordable neighborhoods at record speeds. But here's the catch, because I don't believe that these homes are as affordable as they're leading you to believe. They mass produce entire communities of nearly identical homes. And instead of pricing based on demand, they artificially control the inventory so that they can price higher than what it's actually worth. And instead of actually lowering the price and lowering the base price, they're just adding on financial tricks and incentives like rate buy downs and closing cost assistance. This actually still keeps their profits really high. All these incentives do is create the perception of affordability when really the prices are more inflated than they need to actually be. And while doing this, they're obviously cutting corners, minimizing material costs, taking out standard features in the home, making the lot smaller, making the square footage smaller, while continuing to raise the price steadily and create an illusion of demand. And the worst part is they're selling them to anybody, including a ton of investors, which is going to make the resale value that much harder for home buyers in the future. And so what happens when the average first-time home buyer gets caught up in this? First of all, these communities from these types of builders are not meant for long-term value, especially in a city like Houston, where the suburbs rely on well-planned master plan communities for the future appreciation. Historically, neighborhoods with high investor ownership and high turnover tend to have higher rental ratios, slower appreciation, and homes that really just don't age well. And it's all because these home builders are not building for long-term durability. Number three is that the buyer pool is shrinking, and builders absolutely know this. I don't know why realtors feel the need to tell you that everyone is buying right now, because that is simply not true. Mortgage applications are at a multi-decade low. And the reality is most of the people who are buying right now are buying with cash equity or builder incentives. First-time home buyers, a lot of them are locked out of the market. Move-up buyers not selling because they're locked into a 3% mortgage rate and don't want to trade that for a 7% rate. Middle-income families struggling with affordability. If real demand isn't there from traditional buyers and we're just relying on incentives, what is going to happen when those incentives run out? Which, by the way, eventually builders are going to run out of those incentives because they were really anticipating rate drops this year. Number 4 is the tariffs and labor issues. Now, although none of this has officially happened, it is definitely sounding the alarms for a lot of new construction, and it might actually end up benefiting existing home sellers. First, if the tariffs actually do go through, which I don't know if they will, but 60% of our lumber used on Houston new construction comes from Canada. The Houston Association of Home Builders has already wrote a letter to the president requesting an exemption for them when it comes to tariffs because they honestly are panicking about how they're going to cover the lumber costs or find a new source of lumber to continue the production that they're doing. Second is the labor market is shifting. First of all, Texas home builders rely heavily on undocumented workers. In the Houston area alone, more than 50% of construction workers are undocumented. Meanwhile, another alarming red flag is that new construction postings are at an all-time low. They were even lower than in 2008. What does this mean? Fewer workers, slower construction, higher costs. If they happen to both hit at the same time, that would be really bad news for new construction and buyers, but it might actually be good news for existing home sellers. Number 5 is that the existing home market is stagnant. Not in all areas. There are some areas of Houston that are booming. You have to remember we are the 3rd or 4th largest city in the country, so we have a lot of regions here, and one can be doing much better than the other. But generally, in a lot of our suburbs, the existing market is also stuck in a vicious cycle. Of course, sellers want to offload their outdated home at market value, but buyers are not biting. Homes are literally sitting longer, there's a lot more price reductions, and sellers are realizing they're probably not going to get market value for their existing home. So, of course, inventory is raising quite a bit, but the demand staying the same or lowering. More than 50% of Houston homes, existing and new, are selling below the sales price. The days on market is climbing well over 60 days in a lot of the regions, and the bottom line is that sellers are struggling because they just can't compete with builder incentives. It's almost impossible sometimes to compete with what they can offer. If you're a seller, you have to be realistic about your pricing if you're serious about selling. The longer your home sits, the less you're going to get. So, the Houston market isn't crashing, but it's definitely not as strong and steady as people are saying. If you're a buyer right now, sure, it's probably a good opportunity to buy since it's definitely becoming more of a buyer's market. However, I really hope you're in it for the long game because you're going to have to stay there for a while, probably to make enough money to resell it. If you're trying to make sense of this market, feel free to email me. I'd love to help you out. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.